Former Raptors point guard Fred VanVleet has finally broken his silence about his departure away from Toronto, and we're going to break down his most significant comments in today's video. Let's get into it. Welcome everybody to Amateur Hour Sports, to the second channel in the Amateur Hour Production Network for additional Toronto Raptors content where we go into trending topics like this. We can also go into deeper topics concerning the Raptors. So if you're a fan of the team, you're going to love the channel. Make sure you are subscribed, helping us on the road to 2,000 subs. And if you enjoyed this one along the way, make sure to smash that like button. Check out my main channel as well if you have not done so already. And Fred VanVleet, as I mentioned, spoke about his departure from the Raptors on a recent appearance on the Woj pod. And we got a little bit of insight as well into his final season in Toronto, on top of the decisions that ultimately led to Fred VanVleet choosing to sign with the Houston Rockets in free agency, leaving the Raptors completely for nothing. Now, he did mention the money aspect as well, and obviously the biggest reason why Fred VanVleet chose the Rockets over the Raptors, the biggest reason was the financial aspect. The Houston Rockets were offering Fred VanVleet a max contract, around $42.5 million a year. The Raptors did not and should not have offered Fred VanVleet that amount of money, but this is just kind of what you risk when you allow your key players to hit free agency. Yes, they may have a desire to return to your team, but also you could get priced out by somebody else who has a deeper pocket at the time. The Raptors could not have afforded to give him that money, but they wouldn't have given it to him anyways, and he ultimately ends up on the Houston Rockets. But even though money was the most significant factor that drove Fred to choose a different team, to go to the Houston Rockets, even though the money was the most significant factor, there were certain things that went down near the end of the season, and the season as a whole, and in free agency, that made Fred VanVleet at peace with his decision. He was open to staying in Toronto. He enjoyed his time in Toronto mostly, but he did mention that in his final season with the Raptors, he felt unhappy, and perhaps that unhappiness led to struggles shooting, inconsistencies on the court, and now Fred VanVleet, in perhaps a better state of mind in Houston, is playing very well for the team. But one comment in particular that I wanted to highlight for this video here is something that Yardbreaker also mentioned as far as a quote from this piece. Fred VanVleet says, "Once we got to the point where it was like, okay, they are clearly going in a different direction. This is not the situation that I was brought into and kind of nurtured in and cultured in and won a championship in. This is a different environment that they have to kind of start over a little bit. It was just a time where it's starting to go around Scotty. It's starting to go around some of the young guys. My value there probably wasn't as great as it was in Houston." That's really what it all boiled down to. Fred VanVleet also made mention of Masai Ujiri and how the Raptors, it didn't really seem like the Raptors were particularly super interested in bringing VanVleet back. It was kind of a case for the Raptors that, like, they didn't really want to bring him back, but they also didn't want to lose him for free. And that kind of enraged me when I saw that, because, like, if the Raptors weren't super convinced about their future with Fred or super convinced about having Fred on the team, why did they let it go to free agency? Why did they not trade him before that point? But beyond that, Fred VanVleet in particular, his situation in Toronto, I don't want it to turn into like a hate piece for Fred VanVleet, but I mean, it made to in the comment section. It's certainly not going to come from me, a hate piece about VanVleet. But yes, the player had his struggles last season, but significantly improved after the trade deadline when we acquired a good pick and roll threat for him to play with. The shooting was bad, definitely, all throughout the season. But other than the shooting, I thought that overall his game was fine. And we're seeing that Fred VanVleet is not cooked. We're seeing Fred VanVleet is not washed. And we're seeing the value that he provides to a team with the Houston Rockets. There were conversations last year that he'll never be the same. He'll never be the same player. There were big conversations that he's not a leadership figure. Well, he's clearly proven both of those things wrong in a very short amount of time with the Houston Rockets. So Fred VanVleet, one of Toronto's greatest players. I mean, what can we really say about it? Toronto don't get all-stars all the time, and Fred VanVleet was an all-star that played in Toronto, wanted to be in Toronto, won a championship in Toronto, was amazing in the closeout championship ceiling victory for the Toronto Raptors. That doesn't just happen, like, especially if you're an older Raptors fan, you are going to understand that. But as far as the comments here, I have a little bit of a pushback to Fred being more so upset that the team is going in a different direction. I'm not sure. I wouldn't necessarily say he's upset, but he understood the situation is starting to go around Scotty a bit more. Like, okay, you should understand that was going to be the case regardless. Like, you have a young player that's getting better, demanding more touches, and should be getting those touches. I don't think that the unhappiness from Fred spilled out onto the court where he was like willfully neglecting Scottie Barnes as much as maybe some people want to say that. I thought Fred VanVleet's demeanor and on-court demeanor and the way he played, I don't think any of that showcased a sense of unhappiness and just trying to work on himself, selfishness. I didn't feel like that was the case for Fred VanVleet. Maybe Masai Ujiri hinted that him and Siakam fit in that boat, but once again, I never felt as though that was the case. But to have those thoughts behind the scenes is a little bit strange to me. Like, we're even seeing now, even on top of the Raptors going around Scottie a bit more, which obviously they should be doing, even with the Raptors going around Scottie a little bit more, Dennis Schroeder is the replacement point guard, and Dennis Schroeder gets tons of touches. Dennis Schroeder gets tons of shots up. So as far as like the on-court sharing of the basketball, I don't think these comments are very warranted there, because Fred VanVleet still would be getting a ton of the ball if he was here. But, you know, the situation, yeah, the team is going to start to prioritize Scottie a little bit more as time goes on. The team is going to start focusing on Scottie a little bit more. And he is right. His value wasn't probably as great as it was in Houston. Ime Udoka really wanted to change the dynamic of that team. He wanted to build up the character of that team. He wanted a leadership figure for the team, and one who could defend the point of attack, who could space the floor, who could be a floor general on top of everything else. And that's exactly what they got in Fred VanVleet. They were willing to overpay to make that happen, and so far they have to be extremely happy with what they have in the player. The team is finding a lot more success so far this season than we were expecting to. Fred VanVleet is playing well, and you know what? Fred is starting to feel happy with his basketball again. So it was a bit of a bold statement for me to say that this is not the situation that I was brought into. Like, yeah, obviously the team is taking a little bit of a step back. That's going to happen with a lot of teams in the post-championship era. I get that, you know, the front office hasn't exactly been at its best in the last few years, especially with Fred VanVleet. But, like, oh my God, going back to my point, they barely even made an attempt to get Fred VanVleet. Fred said he appreciated the Masai was open to him about it, but they barely even made a real attempt to actually go and keep Fred VanVleet. And and they didn't trade him when they had the opportunity to do so. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Here, let me see here. He said, here's one from Sports Illustrated. I remember meeting with Houston and just kind of hearing their vision, hearing how they see things, and being excited about the new possibility. I also remember meeting with Toronto and kind of leaving that meeting feeling refreshed because I was so uncertain about making a change. I felt it, but that meeting kind of sealed it. Sealed it in the sense that he was comfortable leaving after that. Like, if Masai was straightforward, gave a great line of communication, and he appreciates that from Masai, and Masai was, you know, on the fence about bringing him back, like, why did the team not trade him? But that's not what this is all about. Fred VanVleet as a whole, leaving the Raptors, it's good to get this sort of insight here where, you know, I understand his point of view here. It was mostly a money thing, but it was also like the Raptors probably weren't really content in paying him all that money, so it became an easier decision for him to leave. Don't love his pushback, and maybe I'm reading a bit too much in between the lines here, but don't love the ultimate pushback on, you know, the team going around Scottie. That's naturally going to happen. Perhaps he was more acceptive of that fact that, okay, Scottie Barnes is up and coming. My role here is going to diminish. Here's a team that really wants to use my skill set to the fullest, and hey, they're going to pay me $42 million a year for that. That makes sense from Fred VanVleet's perspective, so nice to get a little bit of closure there as to the departure. Nice to know it was an amicable departure as well. Fred VanVleet, as far as, you know, like Raptors accolades go, you know, that's not a player that's even in the discussion to get his jersey retired or anything of that nature. But, you know, hopefully on his return to Toronto, and I imagine this will be the case, he gets a really nice tribute video and the fans go crazy and show their support for a player who was a significant part of the greatest era in the history of the Toronto Raptors. Hopefully so far, and hopefully some great times are ahead, and hopefully those great times ahead are building around Scottie Barnes on this team. So what do you make of Fred VanVleet's comments? Am I going too far with what I'm saying? Am I not going far enough with what I'm saying? Give me your thoughts and opinions down below. Smash that like button if you enjoyed. Check out the other channels that I have here. My main channel in the red and my amateur reactions channel in the gold. That is for the best stream highlights from my main channel in the red. So plenty more Raptors content in the network. You can also, you can check out another video that I have here for my main channel. You can subscribe to this channel. And guys, I will see you again very soon for another video here on Amateur Sports 2.